3000 BCE, and here we have a tribe gathering food. Not much trade was done during this time period because all the different tribes were self-sufficient and separate, as most were nomadic. Also during this time, there was a movement called the Neolithic Revolution, in which the tribes started settling in places where the soil was wet and rich in nutrients, so they could grow food year-round. The first civilization started, and domestication of animals also occurred, the first one of which was the dog. Still not much trade was done, as each of the city-states was separate and self-sufficient. Out of this time, the lower, middle, and upper classes were formed. Since civilization started to grow during the classical period and city-states became more abundant, communication was good so that people could interact with one another. The Gupta developed a system of counting and the number 0. The Phoenicians had their alphabet that was later adopted by the Greeks, and this led to the creation of many faiths. Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, and Confucianism were all developed, and this led to an increase of trade between different places. Many trade routes were developed, and they were all based on geographical location. If a river was nearby, they would trade via the river, or whatever the passageway may be. One of the trade routes that came to be during this time period was the Silk Road between China and Europe, in which the biggest thing traded was silk. The Indian Ocean trade and the Sahara caravan routes were also very big. Most trade was done on foot, while others were done on boat.
The post-classical period from 600 to 1450 was a time of new ideas and a growth of trade. The four major trade networks were the Indian Ocean, Mediterranean, Sub-Saharan, and the Silk Road. At this time, most trade was land-based, but in the Indian Ocean, also known as the spice trade, monsoons allowed for safer and better transportation. Besides monsoons, new technologies such as the compass, astrolabe, and Chinese junks allowed for ships to navigate better and get to their destination on time.
After centuries of misuse, the Silk Road became a very dangerous place. However, once the Mongols came to power, the Silk Road became very, very safe, as they made trade so safe it was said that you could carry a gold plate on your head from one end to the other.
The Mongols!
With the Silk Route open, explorers such as Marco Polo were able to grasp much of the land between China and Europe. Lesser-known explorers such as Ibn Battuta were also able to grasp that area.
The gold salt trade in Africa sent more gold to Europe, which allowed for the stimulation of economies.
Hey, you want to trade?
Are you a Muslim?
No, why?
I'm sorry, I can't trade with you. It's part of the rules, bro.
One second thought, maybe I can join your religion.
Okay, sure.
The period between 1500 and 1750 was a time full of disparity and violence, mostly due to the Europeans. This time had some of the most evil trade known up to this time, the most apparent of which was the slave trade in the Atlantic, which included the Africans, the West Africans, the Europeans, and the Americas. This time also included the discovery of a large amount of silver in Spanish America, which affected China and also the Spanish Empire in very negative ways. Also in this time period as well was the trade in Africa between Islamic nations.
Over 2 million slaves died in the transatlantic slave trade. Not only that, but over 12.5 million slaves were transported over the Atlantic to work in the Americas. This was caused by mercantilist ideals, the dominance of the Americas, and the need for workers. The Europeans needed the Africans, as the Native Americans had largely died off, and actually knew the land well enough to escape their enslavement. The majority of slaves went to Brazil and the Caribbean. Only 5% went to the United States. This trade allowed Africans to acquire guns without losing a large percentage of their population, as it was largely men imported, gave the nations involved in this trade wealth beyond your imagination, and killed off many of the Native Americans.
A large source of trade deficit came when the Spanish exported large amounts of silver from Spanish America to China. This started in 1545 when the Spanish found a silver mountain. This led to the Spanish to sell a large portion to China, which at the time only accepted certain products to be traded despite the McCartney mission. This included silver. This event caused both nations to prosper for a moment and then spiral into inflation. Another large trade sector was in Islamic nations that took slaves from the interior Africa to be servants and soldiers in the gunpowder nations. Though not nearly as large as the Atlantic trade, the Islamic slave trade included over 2 million slaves.
Hey, my name is Kumar, and now we'll be talking about trade systems during the 1700s and 1900s. Many revolutions took place during this time, such as the Industrial Revolution, French Revolution, Haitian Revolution, Latin American Revolution, more American Revolution, and these revolutions brought a lot of change to the trade that went on during this time. And the gunpowder nations were still alive during this time, but they weren't doing so well because of rising inflation.
Hey man, can I have a carpet?
Sure, man, here's the carpet
Thanks.
to trade. You know, I'm a Sophomore, and lately trade has been really bad due to inflation.
Aw man, that sucks. But it's good for me.
Okay, now we will move on to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a very important revolution because it changed the way trade took place. It helped us create things faster and get our jobs done more efficiently. It also helped improve the military, and because the Western powers had an improved military, the Opium Wars took place. But a good thing that came out of the Industrial Revolution was the steam engine created by James Watt. The steam engine allowed things such as the train to be created, and these things allowed capitalism to take place, and capitalism allowed globalization to take place, and because of globalization, we are here today.
Hey, James Watt. What did you do to make the world a better place?
Alright, so my name is James Watt. I invented the steam engine. Not to brag or anything, but I kind of started the Industrial Revolution. And this led to increase in trade, which in turn led to globalization.
That is all for this video. We'll see you next time when we solve the mystery of the lost Schuler hair. But for now, enjoy the next scene about globalization.
Gee, I wish I had a granola bar right now, but they don't make them in, you know, the woods. Wow, that's amazing! Jolly! How did you get this, mister?
It's simple. Globalization, my friend.
But what is that?
I'll show you.
Yo.
Before 1900, products were hard to get. Ships carrying commodities had to undergo risky voyages across the sea. These voyages were long and expensive, and limited what common people had access to. But as technology improved with the Industrial Revolution, and new markets opened up all over the globe, products became easier to access to common people.
But where did they get all these new materials?
That's a great question. I'll show you! This guy gets all the stuff. He works in a cacao farm in Latin America.
Yeah, it sucks.
That's right. You see, even though most forms of forced labor ended in the 19th century, a lot of nations were still dependent on the industrial powers. So it allowed for foreign markets to exploit the workers of those countries.
That's business for you. It's a lot easier to get raw materials and labor overseas than it is than it is in my country. But I get rich and they get granola bars, therefore everyone's happy.
Except for me.
Shh. 3 cheers for capitalism.
Hip hip!
Hip,
Hooray!
hip, hip,
Hooray!
hip, hip,
Hooray! I've learned so much today, but can I have that granola bar now?
Sure, it costs $1.50. You do have money, right?